Yeah, when I died when I was brain dead,
Yeah.
and when I did, for years I couldn't explain it to anybody, so I didn't share it with anybody. But I still have. I mean, I remember to this day that like when I died because I left my body. My mom jumped up,
Mhm.
resuscitated me. My nurses came in. They were at the foot of my bed from the left. And then I looked out the window. It was a dark, cloudy day. Then I went back into my body.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Infinite Abilities Podcast. I am your host, Nick Yerhart, and we are here to encourage each other to find our own unique abilities. Let's go. All right, everyone. So today we have Joe Burgess, and this guy's story is truly remarkable. You know, it's similar to me, where like both of us shouldn't be here, but God had other plans for us, and we're just taking what we have been dealt, we're rolling with it, and we're helping a lot of people in the process. So, Joe, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Nick. I appreciate your time and your energy.
And Joe's working on a book about his life, and he shared the first chapter with me. So the questions that I'm going to ask today are based off that first chapter, which that first chapter was incredible. So good job on that one.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So let's start with your accident. You
Okay.
had an accident when you were young.
Yep.
You were 19, is that correct?
A couple months before 19.
Yep. So you had a car accident,
Yep.
and can you just tell us, like, let's just start at that point. Tell
Right.
us about the accident. So I know you and your friends were driving,
Yep.
and some guy came up and passed your friends, and
Yep.
you basically said, "I'm a young teenager. You're not gonna pass me." So
Right.
let's start there.
Perfect. That's a good place to start. We were just driving down the highway. I honestly have no idea how fast we were going because I can't remember
Mhm.
it.
Yep.
But we were driving and then we got to a 90-degree curve, and I know this because like my brother who races cars went to the scene of the accident, and he like basically saw my skid marks and like measured the stuff, and so he did like found out what happened, like that I rolled my car and there were the divots and all that. But I went
Mhm.
into a 90-degree curve. I went low on the road because the guy I was racing with cut me off, and I went low on the road. I slammed on my brakes when I was in the gravel. I rolled my car
Mhm.
2 or 3 times into a farmer's field. My headlights went out because my battery broke. So my
Yeah.
friends who were driving behind me, they didn't know what anything happened to me. They had just thought that I went on to town. And
Mhm.
so they didn't know anything had happened to me. The people on the corner heard squealing of the tires, and they were lying down. It was a Sunday night. They were watching TV, getting ready to go to bed, start the work week. And they heard tires squealing. They jumped up, and he saw me, and she jumped on the phone, and he ran out and jumped into his Ford Bronco, took it over there, shined the headlights on it, saw someone laying in the passenger seat. So he thought that the driver got thrown from the vehicle,
Yeah.
and so he was searching the field for a driver. And his wife or fiance or whatever called 911, which was a few miles down the road, and then they got there. Um, it was it was kind of, he said to me that he told me about, he's like, I've never heard anyone snoring so loud in my life as when I heard you. And I was, meaning that I was out. I
Yeah.
severed 3/4 of the nerves on the back, on my brainstem.
Yep.
And I had a scar that was on top, like right behind my left ear, and I had a
Mhm.
scar that was on top of my right foot. Those are the only things physically that happened to me other than my brain injury, which was
Mhm.
basically a teddy bear in a washing machine, or a dryer more or less, spinning around and sloshing, and my skull, my brain was hitting the side and then reverberating, and it's, so I don't know, all the damage that I had to my brain was very extensive.
Yeah.
I
And
recently go ahead.
before we get into like when you're at the hospital, because that's like a whole story in itself, I have a question. So
Yeah,
in your book, sorry, you described your car accident, like the moment that it happened, as the last day of a life you knew.
right.
So if you could go back and talk to your younger self just before that night, well, what would you say to him about those decisions that impacted your life?
It's really weird because, to be honest, I wouldn't change it.
Mm-hmm.
And because if I were to change it, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I wouldn't be where
Exactly.
I am today. I wouldn't have my message that I have. I wouldn't have. I survived a 99.9% mortality rate.
Mm-hmm.
And that made, 999 people were dead where I lived. And then to multiply that by 10 and get 10,000 people, 9,990 people died, 10 of us lived. I was the one out of the 10 that had the function that I did. I wasn't catatonic, I wasn't vegetative, I wasn't anything like that. My brain was processing and all that kind of stuff. So I was the one out of the 10 in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at it as I literally stand up for these 9,990 people who can't survive, who died,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I represent the 9 other people who are unable to do what I can do. I'm the
Yeah.
only one that can be their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how, and I've taken that to heart because I've looked for answers in everything that I do. I always seek the answer. And I'm very blessed, I should say, because the universe gives me the answers. And
Mm-hmm.
throughout my experience, I've been given a lot of answers, and then my journey was to find out the question.
Yeah.
So, I'm very, I'm very blessed because of my situation.
Exactly.
I'm not taking anything away from all those other people, but I represent them, and so
Yeah.
that's why I'm so confident in like everything I'm doing. It's like I don't know. It makes me feel better about myself. It makes me feel value. I
Yeah.
had survivor's guilt for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of taking on the fact that I wanted to learn what I could so that I could help all the people who have been through what I've been through.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly. And I love your answer because it's like, I look at my life the same way. It's like I don't want to go back and change anything because everything that happened for a reason and got me to where I am today. So yeah, what if I went back and changed something little, something stupid, and that changed the whole path of my life? That would
then
kind of suck, you
in
know?
that chapter, actually, there's a line about how what if I would have tied my shoes like
Exactly.
before I got in my
Mm-hmm.
car, then I wouldn't have gotten in my car accident. Something as
Yeah.
simple as that,
Mm-hmm.
it's. I've learned though that what I've gained the most from all of it is the fact that whether you want to call it God, whether you want to call it spirit, whether you call it doesn't. I mean, you can call it all kinds of fairies, gnomes, elves, elementals,
Mm-hmm.
angels, it's things that are beyond our comprehension, which
Yeah.
we try to label, but we can't because we don't have the mental faculties to actually label it truly.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what that's a big part of my journey because that's a big part of like so I'm very very into helping people achieve a flow state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And in that flow state of consciousness there's a part of it where you have to understand your soul, where you have to understand your body, where you have to understand your mind. And so when you understand your soul, then you understand that there's more to life than just what we are able to comprehend with these typical five senses.
Yeah.
And so then the mind is just what's in the mind, then the body is the reaction to the body or to the mind
Yeah.
and to the soul. So they all play off of each other. So
And I like that you brought that up because one of the questions that I had for you is you had this near death experience, and you know like did it shift your understanding about what really matters?
Yeah. When I died when I was brain dead,
Yeah.
and when I did, I for years I couldn't explain it to anybody, so I didn't share it with anybody. But I still have. I mean, I remember to this day that like when I died, because I left my body. My mom jumped up,
Mm-hmm.
resuscitated me. My nurses came in. They were at the foot of my bed from the left. And then I looked out the window. It was a dark, cloudy day. Then I went back into my body. I I have I heard conversations when I was brain dead, when I had when no connection, no stimulus, I had no response to stimulus. I was a 3 on a Glasgow coma scale for 5 days. That's why it's a statistic of 99.9% mortality rate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, I had all these things that were beyond what the medical field told me was supposed to be happening and
Yep.
would happen or whatever. So, because I was experiencing all these things that nobody could explain to me, that made me understand completely that there is much more to this life than any of us
Mm-hmm.
can comprehend. And so, with
Yeah.
knowing that, I have sought out the things that I can find the answers in to
Mm-hmm.
explain all that kind of stuff.
I like
So,
that.
I,
I like that.
thank you.
And to kind of get back to your story, because I think that this part is really important. So when when they discovered your accident
Right.
and you got rushed to the hospital, what happened at that point when you got to the hospital? Did anybody know who you were?
Actually, I didn't have any of my driver's license on me. It was in my
Mm-hmm.
car. So nobody knew who I was. And the attending physician came into the room where I was, and they were like, "We don't know who he is." And he's like, "Oh, that's Joe." And his mom works up in quality assurance. And the only reason he knew me was because I dated his daughter a year prior. So,
Yep.
so it was kind of. I mean, I wouldn't have known who he was, and he wouldn't have known who I was. But
Yeah.
luckily, I knew it, and he knew my mom, and so that
Mm-hmm.
was a big part of like. So they knew who to call and all that to get a hold of her and all that. But then when they called her, they didn't. They got to the hospital very quickly because they were told immediately that they're like, "You need to get here ASAP because we don't expect him to make it through the night." And
Yeah.
then when I got through the night, that we don't expect him to make it till noon. And then it was that we don't expect him to make it through the evening. And it was that way for 3 or 4 days. And they were like, we don't know what's going on. We
I
can't
can't
say.
I can't imagine what your family was going through. Like just to like basically get drug along, It's like we don't but it's like you know, I'm sure that after, probably the second or third day your family's like, yeah, Joe's gonna fight this. So you
I
know,
had, I didn't actually no, because I
no?
ended up with pneumonia and I had a
Mm,
collapsed lung. Um,
wow.
my brain was ended up being so swollen that it was touching my skull for 6 weeks. It took
Wow.
six
Holy
weeks for
crap.
the swelling to go down. So, when I was talking earlier about my brain sloshing around in my skull,
Yep.
that's quite literally the case.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So I forgot. I completely blind
Yeah, no, I just, I know that your mom was by
Oh,
your side like the whole entire time, and
yeah.
that's
She
incredible.
wouldn't leave my side for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
stayed by my side at the hospital, and she wouldn't leave the hospital. She went down to the cafeteria every once in a while, but she wouldn't leave the hospital until she knew that I was going to live. And
Mm-hmm.
then she went to church, and then and that's about as far as leaving the hospital went. So until a little bit more, but my family was my oldest brother, who was never emotional or anything, my family actually told me that he cried, and he's like, I didn't know him, and I didn't get, he was my little brother, and I took him for granted, and all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
uh, I mean, I had the waiting room to the ICU was like constantly full of like my classmates, my friends, my family,
Mm-hmm.
and my family's friends, and all that. Like throughout the day, there was whole Jerry Springer episodes going on in the waiting room with my ex girlfriend, my ex
Oh boy.
fiance, and a girl that I happened to cheat on her with who came to visit me, and it was just all of cluster. But it was, I don't know, it was a good time, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's our life. That's how it is a lot of times.
You know,
Yeah.
it. I've
Now, I kind of want to fast forward a little bit. You
yeah,
know, in the hospital, you fought for what did you say, 6 weeks?
yeah.
But then after that, you had to rebuild everything. You had to learn how to walk again, how to talk again, even how to brush your teeth again.
Yep.
So, can you take us into that part of your journey?
So, so for 6 weeks when I was in the hospital, I was like in a deep like a deep coma. Then I was in a
Mm-hmm.
medium, like a moderate, whatever. So I was at different levels of consciousness throughout the first 6 weeks. Then when the swelling went down, I walked about 100 feet on a Friday, and my therapist was walking behind me with the wheelchair, and I
Yeah.
couldn't make it, and I had to sit down. But then that night that weekend, I ended up going home for the weekend for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I went home, and about 6 o'clock, the swelling went down. And I didn't know it at the time, but I kind of, that's when I actually started calling it my asleep and my awake stage. My asleep stage was when my brain was touching my skull, and I would say what was ever on my mind, and I would do what was ever on my mind, and I had no filter whatsoever. But then when
Mm-hmm.
I was in my awake stage, when my brain, the swelling went down, I started to, I mean, I'm just like I am now. I'm just like you are,
Yeah.
just like how everybody is. So that was my sleep and my awake stage. So then Saturday morning I woke up and I was in my sleep stage again. And then about noon I switched over to my awake stage. And then
Hmm.
Sunday morning I woke up and I was in my awake stage from then on. And I've been in
Okay.
that consciousness ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So I've the thing about me is because I've had these different variances of consciousness of like leaving my body, of like thinking I'm dreaming everything, and like literally I there was one time that I was being pushed to therapy, and there was a really large woman in an extra large wheelchair being pushed towards me, and I'm like, wow, that lady's really fat. And my mom had to stay behind and like apologize and all that. But to me,
Mm-hmm.
I was dreaming everything. So I
Yeah.
had no filter. I was just, to me, it was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And like all those things I'm conscious of, I'm
Mm-hmm.
aware of. So when I see people who are acting like don't take responsibility for themselves and all that kind of stuff, then they're fully conscious of it and they're not taking responsibility for themselves at all. I'm like, what's wrong with you? That's
Mm-hmm.
not what you're supposed to do, because I've had the experience that I see the value in taking ownership and responsibility for your actions and your
Yep.
everything that you say. And I'm a very firm believer in say what you mean what you say.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say it, you better mean it, and if you don't
Yep.
mean it, if you don't follow through, then I'm not going to trust you. If I don't trust you, then I'm not necessarily going to work with you.
I agree with you 100%. I live by that. I take responsibility for everything, even the things that are technically out of my control. Well, are they? Because I somehow put myself in a situation for that to affect me. So we can take responsibility for everything. And when you do that, like you say, you become more honest. Like you're honest with yourself. And yeah, it's just like, it goes along with like what another thing that I live by is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So if you're not taking responsibility, I bet you're playing victim,
Yep. Very.
and you never want to do that. That's just hey, I did that. I know because
Yep.
I've been there. I had a stage in my life where I played victim. Poor me, poor this, poor that. Why am I like this? And guess what? All that does is put you down in a hole even further.
And then you
And
don't know. Then you can't figure out how to dig out of it by yourself.
yeah,
And so
exactly.
then that's actually the good reason, or the good thing, and the reason why we do what we do is
Hmm.
because, like, I'm here to lift everybody out of their hole.
Me
I
too.
I know I can lift them up. I know I can get them up. I know that I can because I've put so much. So a big thing with me was I had a horrible mental health after I got out of the hospital. And
Hmm.
I was suicidal, I was depressed, I was anxious, I was paranoid. So I had all these psychological issues going on. And then I ended up getting into a little bit of trouble and I had to go see a therapist. So I went and saw the therapist and he introduced me to meditation. And
Hmm.
that totally changed my life because
Yeah.
from the time I got in my accident till that point, my mind was chaos. It was crazy. I was
Hmm.
thinking everything. I couldn't control this. I couldn't control that. I tried to control this. I tried to control that. And my mind was just going crazy. But once I learned how to focus my mind on myself, I was able to breathe for the first
Hmm.
time. And then I became very obsessed with meditation. Like I would meditate 5, 6, 7 times a day. I would meditate for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours at a time. I would meditate in my car on a busy street. I would meditate in the middle of a bar. I meditated. I mean, I did it everywhere because
Yeah.
I looked at it as it if you can condition your mind to be able to deal with all of the external,
Hmm.
then and you're dealing with all the internal, then all the external is just external, and
Yeah.
because you're learning how to deal with the internal, and
Yep.
that's what everybody needs. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the best way to deal. I mean, because there's we have emotions, we have feelings, we have thoughts, we have memories, we have belief, we have all these things. But when we can get them all in a flow state, and when we cannot pay attention to, well, when we can pay like not pay attention to fear based reality, and we can accept
Hmm.
the fact that we are potential, then it's we can all live in, I mean, a better place. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have to we have to have anxiety. We have to have nervousness. I mean,
Hmm.
it's natural, but
You
if you know
can.
how to deal with it,
Yeah.
it's
You can definitely reduce it and make the effects not as bad. That's what I've noticed. It's like, yeah, I meditate. I do breathing exercises multiple times a day. But guess what? I still get stressed out. Like, I am human. I still get stressed out. So, you know, but is it like it was before I started doing that? No, it's way better now. Now it's like, okay, yep, I'm gonna get stressed out. And then I'm gonna relax, I'm gonna breathe, and then it's gonna kind of go away. And then I'm gonna deal with whatever is stressing me out.
I notice it as like if my neck ever hurts or my back hurts,
Mm-hmm.
then that's my indication. It's like my spiritual, my mental, or my body and my spiritual lining up to let me know that, because I know that I'm stressed about something, because that's where everybody
Yep.
carries their stresses in their back or their necks. And so when I feel it, then I'm like, okay, so what am I stressed out about? What is getting to me? What is bothering me? And then as soon as I figure it out, it goes away. And
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, we just have to learn how to understand our own system and our own body and how we respond and how our body is talking to us and how, like,
Yeah.
the signs and signals it's giving us.
Yep. Your body will tell you everything it needs. It just takes some time to learn how to read your
Yep.
body. You gotta understand. Okay, what does it mean?
Right.
Let's say, like you said, your back hurts. Okay, what's causing that? And yeah, it can be, you sit in the vehicle all day, whatever, that's normal. But if it continues, you know, you could be deficient in something. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I look at that. That's a big part of everything. Like, so I started out like studying and learning about consciousness as literally a survival state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So a survival state of consciousness is fight or flee. So if you're going to fight a situation or flee a situation, you're using a survival state of consciousness. Then the
Mm-hmm.
next thing is knowledge. So then once you gain the knowledge, so technically it's an observation. Then once the observation, it transitions into knowledge, then understanding, then comprehension, then awareness. So those are the levels of consciousness. But when you survive in a state of I need to fight, 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 you're
Mm-hmm.
using the most basic sense of consciousness. You're not evolving. You're not
Mm-hmm.
acting. You're not thinking or acting rationally or logically,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not. Nowhere in nature is it logical for anything to fight constantly or to
Yeah.
flee constantly. It's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time with predators and prey. There's only about a 40 to 60% kill rate for most predators,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to get away. And because if you can't have a constant with a predator, because if they win all the time, then it's going to go extinct. So they're not going to
Yep.
have any more food. So
Yep. Exactly.
I mean, everything is tied together. I look at a long time ago, I learned about a tribe in Africa called the Daba tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they find a lion that killed something, and
Mm-hmm.
then they walk up to the lion, they chase the lion off, then they cut a quarter off of it, and then they see the lion, and another warrior is like watching, and then when they
Yeah.
see it start to come back, they just turn and go back, and then the lion comes back to it and gets it. I have used that to study and to so if they're able to do that, why can't we?
Mm-hmm.
So what is stopping any of us? Because they're just a human.
Mm-hmm.
I look at that as potential, or I look at
Mm-hmm.
that as potential, and so then where they're like not doing that is fear,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Yep.
So I know that I'm
Exactly.
talking about everything, and I'm jumping all
You're
over the
good. Hey,
place.
this is on my podcast, my rules.
Right on.
I think it's awesome that we can just talk about the things that we're passionate about. That's why I wanted to bring you on. You have an amazing story. You're an inspiration, and now you're taking what you went through and you're going out there and helping others. So that's what's remarkable. So I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate you, my friend.
Yeah, and I'm about 99% sure that our listeners will be able to hear you on a future episode, because I know that we're going to do another one in the future. We're working together now, and we're helping each other. I'm helping you get your story down in a book, and we're gonna go places. So it's gonna be really awesome.
I'm going to be starting my own podcast here soon called Flawed But Fearless. And I'm
Ooh,
going to have you as a guest on that one.
let's do it. Let's do
Right
it.
on. Right on.
I think I know a guy that can help you with your podcast.
Right on. It seems like I know somebody who can.
Alright. And then I gotta ask you, so my slogan, as you know, is your abilities are infinite. What does that mean to you?
We are all limitless potential.
I love that. I love that. And then what's one message that you would like to leave the audience?
Put yourself out there. Don't be
Love it.
scared. Don't allow things to inhibit you. Don't let limiting beliefs stop you
Yep.
from achieving your goals, because they're
And keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and if you are scared, just do it scared.
Yes, very much so. It's so to me, like, so when I hear somebody's scared of sharks,
Mm-hmm.
you're on the land, you're not in the water. There's chances are if you go in the water, you're not gonna get, like, go in a lake, you're not gonna get bit by a shark there. Go in the
Mm-hmm.
ocean, chances are you're not gonna get bit by a shark there. So fear to me is logical and illogical, and
Mm-hmm.
rational and irrational. So a fear of sharks to me is illogical and irrational, because unless you deal with them, there's nothing to be scared of.
Mm-hmm.
If you put yourself out there.
If you enjoyed this show, please go ahead and share it on your Instagram story and tag me in it, the Nick Yerhart. Also, go ahead and share it anywhere else that you see fit, because the only way that I can grow this is by you guys sharing it. I don't sell anything on here. I don't have any sponsors, so let's just get it out there by word of mouth and help more people. Alright, everyone, remember, your abilities are infinite.